Well, hey guys, it's Dr. Drake 63. Thank you for joining me today. I try to avoid political type discussions and talking about firearms in the news and things like that. Pretty much avoid that on this channel with some rare exceptions. I like to keep the focus on the use of firearms as from a hobbyist perspective of someone who hunts, and also from the perspective of self-defense, and not really interested in being one of the many voices that's out there right now uh, going off about their positions on gun control or the Second Amendment or the NRA or things like that. But it's kind of hard to keep quiet for me right now just because of the reaction that I see once again after some deadly mass shootings, which this last weekend, we're in early August 2019, you had a horrific shooting in Brownsville, Texas at a Walmart where there were, at this time, 30 some odd people killed and another 9 or so people killed in Dayton, Ohio. Both cases, semi-automatic sporting rifles were used. Although the media designated them as assault rifles, they're not. They kind of look like it, but the definition of an assault rifle is something that has select fire capability, and these do not. We're once again seeing the same reactions from what I'm going to call both sides, and those sides are as follows. The people who immediately say we need to ban all sorts of firearms, if not all of them, but specifically so-called weapons of war. And then on the other side, you've got people saying, hey, the Second Amendment means that we're not going to infringe any of that, and we don't want any changes at all, and really the solution is to have more armed security everywhere we go. Well, it seems that if you suggest anything other than that to my fellow firearms enthusiasts, many of them will just immediately shut down and say that you're a traitor to the cause and things like that. Personally, I'm going to give you my 2 cents worth. Number one, I believe very strongly that the person, not the firearm, is the reason for these mass events. And you know, if you don't believe that, then look at the things that have happened just in the last half a generation or so, where you've had 911, where some people decided to use box cutters to hijack an airplane and killed over 3,000 people in the World Trade Centers. You also have things like the Oklahoma City bombing, where fertilizer and fuel oil in a rental truck was used to kill over 160 people. More people are killed every year with a hammer than with any kind of long gun, any kind of rifle in this country. The real numbers that are racking up are typically in some of these cities like Chicago and Baltimore and so forth, parts of LA, where handguns are used quite a bit, and a lot of it is people that are in gangs and things like that shooting each other. Another big driver of firearm deaths statistics is suicide. Well, I don't believe suicide is morally right, but I also don't believe it's the same as committing murder on someone else. Now, I believe that the Second Amendment affords us the right to keep and bear arms, okay? But I don't look at it as such an absolute statement that it means that we can't take measures to keep firearms out of the hands of people who we know are going to be dangerous people with firearms. Lately, you've seen a lot of talk about red flag laws and expanded background checks. Now, I happen to live in a state that has a pretty healthy background check system in addition to the federal system when you go to purchase a new firearm. In Minnesota, where I live, if you have want to buy a handgun or a semi-automatic rifle, you need to get either a permit to purchase, which is local sheriff runs a background check on you, and you have a card which enables you for a year's time to make purchases of those items. When you go to make that purchase, in addition to that, you still have to pass the federal background check. So you're talking about really a redundancy that's quite thorough, in my opinion. The other is if you have a concealed carry permit, that is also a background check. It's issued for a period of 5 years. by your local sheriff's department of the county that you're in, and you need that plus the federal background check, the NICS check, when you purchase a firearm. Now, there's some states where that's not the case. You just simply have the federal NICS. You do that process, and there you go. So when we talk about expanding federal background checks and things of that nature, I think they're also talking about what do we consider a red flag, if you will, in the federal background check, not just who's in it. And I know there's some issues with states that weren't sharing mental health database and things like that. Now, the red flag laws that we talk about, most of them as written ignore due process, and that's where I have a problem with them. A lot of them are set up, depending on the state, where somebody can say, this guy scares me, I know he's a gun owner, and you're kind of considered guilty until such time that you can prove that you're not, and in the meantime you could lose your firearms. Now, I may be oversimplifying the process a bit. I believe that if someone is known to be a dangerous person, and I'm going to give a great example of this in a second. If someone's known to be dangerous, I don't believe they ought to have the right to have firearms. And the case in point is the Parkland shooter. This was a young man who had been called to the attention of police, I think it was half a dozen times, 8 times. This person was known to make terroristic threats. He was known to even comment on social media that he wanted to hurt a bunch of people or shoot up a school. Well, if you're going to have a case like that where somebody's going to basically self-identify or self-incriminate themselves as a dangerous person, I'm sorry. I don't believe the Second Amendment applies to them anymore. And I don't believe if you sat down our founding fathers and the people who created these constitutional amendments, as well as the Constitution itself, would view it any different. They're not stupid. So I think that can be a little bit of a slippery slope when we stick so much to that wording of shall not be infringed that we just say, hey, you know, we're going to just have to take the lumps when they come along. I don't buy the notion that mass murder is an acceptable byproduct or an acceptable circumstance which you just have to suck it up and go with if you're a Second Amendment supporter. I don't believe we should limit firearm types. I think the NFA and the ATF is kind of a joke. I don't see consistency in their rulings. A lot of it isn't even law, it's just opinion of people. These are bureaucrats, they're not elected officials, and I see a lot of problems with the ATF. I'm not going to go as far as to say, well, we should abolish it or things like that, but I think we need to look at what its role is. Here's what I think its role's going to be, and I hope I'm not giving anybody any ideas here, but I don't think that the AR platform or other scary black guns like AKs and things are going to be banned at the federal level. I think you're going to continue to see states do things, and that accomplishes the same objective. You can't have the same AR I can have in Minnesota if you live in California or New York or several other states. I think you're going to continue to see that movement. So word out to guys in states at the state level, get involved at the state level. I am. The next thing is I could see from a federal level saying, well, if you want to register a lower receiver for an AR, for example, great. It's going to become an NFA item. Send in your request with $200. We'll do an extended background check on you, and you know, who knows how long it would take with the number of people that would be turning in requests. It would be crazy. And then there you have a register of firearms, which I know a lot of people are against. I'm against it for a number of reasons, just because we know that there's people out there that for political gain would publish that kind of information and have angry crowds showing up at your door and things like that. That's very, very real possibility, and we know that some of what I'll consider to be extremists in the anti-gun movement wouldn't think twice about that. So but I see the future of the black rifle, of it being an NFA item at the federal level, and continue to see it banned at the state level. My advice, kind of point going forward, guys, is if you're really concerned about that, get active, very active at your state level, because like I said, that's where it's going to happen. I want to apologize for the long drawn out dissertation. You guys can see a lot of lectures about firearms, and you can see guys throw their hands up and rant and rave and scream and spit at the camera and everything about how mad this all makes them. This has been going on my whole lifetime, and I don't accept it. It does make me mad, but I also see what's going on in the world. The folks that are against private ownership of firearms, specifically quote-unquote black rifles, these folks are so much more motivated, so much better funded, and so much better organized than we as firearms owners as a group. It's sad to say, but it's true. So we're either going to get together as a group and get our shit together. We're going to quit infighting and throwing rocks at each other. We're either going to do those things, or state by state, law by law, infringement upon infringement, we'll get to a point where 25 years from now, maybe if you're lucky, you can own a slingshot. Because that's really the final agenda for a lot of people, or they think it's just limited to hunting. So anyway, like I said, this was kind of long drawn out, not super entertaining to watch, but I wanted to weigh in on this subject. Geez, everybody else has been. We've seen it in the media. We know what area where they're focusing and what their agenda is. It's anything that's a liberal agenda anymore, which is unfortunate. I hope that we'll see the smoke blow over. I don't have a problem with people working together on this. I think what happens is when these mass shootings happen, everybody goes to their corners, they dig in their heels and says how the other side's a bunch of morons. I don't want to compromise the Second Amendment, but I think we do need to look at mental health, and I think we do need to look at who we allow to have firearms and processes we can use, especially when people self-identify as being broken mentally. I don't want them to have firearms. So take that for what it's worth. This is Dr. Drake 63. I want to thank you for watching, and look forward to getting back to talking about firearms.